Hello, welcome everyone. Just a sec, sorry. We have. Okay. Is it okay? Okay. So, this is very funny. Welcome everyone. Also to those of you following us online, by the way. My name is Alessandra Cardaci, and I work at Debating Europe, which is Friends of Europe Citizen Engagement Unit. We like to say that we are the only think tank that we know of that has an in-house citizen engagement unit. What does it mean? It means that we run surveys, focus groups, workshops online and locally in various member states. And in fact, we have partners that are, some of them are here, civil society organizations, to basically gather data. I hope that you notice in some of the parallel sessions we had some data and charts that we collect by engaging citizens. So the idea is to gather data to better understand what citizens, especially young people, feel about various European policies, but also at the same time really giving citizens a space to meet, express their ideas in an accessible, welcoming, safe space, and thus contributing to, build the bridge between the Eurobubble here in Brussels and the local reality. So bring this reality check that I think it's sometimes missing, especially in Brussels. So before I start, I just want to say, first of all, to use the hashtag #StateOfEU if you're active on social media. And you will see you have headsets. That's because this is going to be a short 30 minutes chat with Pascal Lamy that I will introduce in a second, even though I'm sure all of you already know who he is. And then we will move straight into the closing right away. So don't leave the room. So because we have Spanish speakers in the next session, you will need the headset if you don't understand Spanish. So there will be interpretation. So Pascal Lamy, he's leading policymakers in the EU. He's a co-founder and vice president of the Jacques Delors Friends of Europe Foundation, coordinator of the Jacques Delors think tanks, and also former commissioner of trade and director general for WTO. So before I ask you my question, I just want to make a little introduction about this man that we have here that we have heard a lot these days, Jacques Delors, and starting with this quote: how can we build Europe if young people do not see it as a collective project and as a representation of their own future? And indeed, I think we can all agree that we are here these days to celebrate this man, his ideas, his values that are more important than ever. But I also think that we can all agree that the time he lived in, the kind of Europe he lived in, is completely different than the Europe we live in today. And back then, Europe was built on the basis of a so-called democratic deficit, right? So people were not very interested in what was happening at the EU level. And that's probably because they still had a vivid memory of why we built this wonderful project. And that also allowed, frankly, to speed up the European integration process in a way that, in the end, was very beneficial for all of us. But at the same time, I feel that things like Brexit, Euroscepticism, has also happened because probably there was a big, too much, democratic deficit. So the question I have is, sure, we need to keep the memory alive, but at the same time, when we think about young people that may not remember very well what happened back then, how do we build a new narrative? And if I can use a term as former commissioner of trade, how can we sell them a new narrative that is appealing and it's also forward-looking? So to avoid this kind of sometimes anachronistic nostalgia of looking at the past, which is great, it's important, but we need to start thinking about the future, especially if you want to have a bold, fresher narrative around Europe. And so that's the first question, the narrative for youth. And the second question is, how do we apply that to EU policymaking? How can we shift EU policymaking from this short-term thinking to longer-term thinking? And we have around 10 minutes, and then I'll open up the floor to all of you for questions and comments if you want. So just to let you know. Thank you. Mr. Lamy, over to you.
Thanks a lot. I think we might have to start from a paradox, which is that if you look at the measures we have of support for European integration in public opinion, they've never been so high. So if you look at the Eurobarometer, and we've had 40 years of that, and the Institut Jacques Delors in Paris will soon publish a big review of what you read in these 40 years of Eurobarometer, we've reached a situation where either 2/3 of Europeans believe it's good for them, and nearly 3/4 answer yes if the question is you feel the European citizen. That's very high. But on the other side, what we see is the wind for the moment is with movements, parties, attitudes, narratives, which are on the other side. And I think we have to try and understand that. Now, of course, there's a lot of explanation in the fact that when you answer somebody on the phone, on the internet, whether you're for or against, you're not really engaging. You're not really mobilizing. And if you want, which is our view, to push back on those who now believe Europe should change in their direction, getting much further from the sort of value basement which we had, it's different from answering on internet or on the phone whether you're for or against. The question there is you have to start mobilizing. You have to start engaging. And this is where your question is extremely relevant. The most dynamic part of our populations, which is young people, will not mobilize because Delors was right. And by the way, I'm not totally sure he and I was right when we thought, at least for a long time, that economic integration would sort of automatically lead to political integration. And that a happy worker or consumer translates into whatever strange alchemy into a happy citizen. So there's something there which we really need to cope with. And my sense, and this is what we will be trying to do in combining the thought capacity of the Jacques Delors Institute and the campaigning engagement capacity of Friends of Europe, which, as you mentioned, has a big comparative advantage in mobilizing people on the ground, in translating what are vague European issues into issues that are discussed around the table, which are sort of end of the month issues for the people you are interacting with. This is the basic idea. So the idea is stop a sort of very general narrative that building Europe is good, that doesn't mobilize, into themes which trigger much more political energy, and at the end of the day, who I believe are a much more emotional nature than the sort of rational discourse which we and the European institutions have been treading. So, in a nutshell, we have to get out of the cold of rationality, which is comfortable in many ways, to the hot of emotion, which is more controversial, which sometimes obliges to get out of your zone of comfort. I think this is the answer to your question.
Thank you very much. We have time for a couple of comments or questions. So I look at you if you want to contribute and share your perspective on what new narrative of Europe we can sell to young people, also for longer term policy making. And I know we have 4 young people here from Denmark. I don't want to put you in the spotlight, but they were part of our latest project called Voices for Choices, where they participate in focus groups on various topics. And so I encourage them to share what they expect. You have an amazing audience here of people that should listen to you. So take advantage of that if you feel comfortable, obviously. Yes. Can we give? Yeah. And if you can introduce yourself first, please.
Yeah, so I'm Sophia. I'm, like she said, from Denmark. And for the future of Europe and the idea of Europe, I definitely think that it should be sold as, uh, like a lot of young people suffer from loneliness, and a lot of people in general suffer from loneliness. So it would definitely not be bad to sell the idea of a community, and we're very different people. And we're a lot of different countries, and we're very, very different. But the whole idea of we are still having something like that unite us, and I don't think many young people understand what unite us. And I think a lot of the time the youth feels very far away from this. Like, I'm lucky I get to sit here, but most young people don't have a connection to this, and they don't understand this because the education is not always tells the whole story of what is Europe and what really unites us, other than past history and past wars. So in that way, I definitely think that selling the idea and trying to show why are we united, what makes us a group, and what is really this perspective, because young people don't see that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Excellent point on the need to unite and form communities and this sense of belonging to Europe and locally as well. I just want to, yes, sorry, I didn't see you. If you could again introduce yourself first, over there in red.
Thank you very much. Isabel Schwarz, European Culture Foundation in Amsterdam. I think Europe doesn't lack a new narrative. I think we have a good narrative, we have a peace narrative. And I also think it's nothing to do with selling our narrative, but it's actually allowing people to experience what Europe is. And I think the best program, many I guess would agree to that, Europe ever had is Erasmus, because it made people really feel what it means to be a European, learning a different language, learning difference, embracing difference, and being curious about the difference. And I find this session is very much related, and the challenge to the session we had before on AI and platforms, because yes, Pascal, Monsieur Lamy, you're totally right. Since 2007, the European sentiment has never been as strong as today, which can surprise some, but this is evidence. But when we go on the net, in the digital space, what is the most looked at, clicked, downloaded is divisive contents. So how do we balance that from what people actually want to look at and are sort of inclined to look at? It's the polarizational contents, and we can, what is our offer? What is our, what can we else offer than actually the experience? Indeed. And I think something very important that we also see with young people in surveys is the discrepancy of the narrative of the EU related to values and then the actual, what they see, how it's actually translated on the ground. So I think there again, there's a very difficult balance between all that about competitiveness and economy first. And at the same time, well, the union was also built, the people first. Economy was a means to bring people together, never anymore a war again, because you were economically not able to with the European Union. So I think that is a question. It's not about really about selling, because I think that young people are very clever. They will not buy in the selling.
Thank you very much. Though I just want to comment quickly on the Erasmus. We all agree, but it's also for a niche. So we should think of a broader kind of scheme. We have 3 hands up and we have very few. 4. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to take all of them, but we can continue discussion afterwards if Demendra agrees. So first, you, please, if you could introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Ivan Račan. I'm a member of parliament from Croatia. You have said that you yourself and Jacques Delors believed how economic integration would lead to political integration. How do you see this now? Has it led to political integration? Or was there maybe a critical error in the thinking that economic integration would lead to political integration? And is that maybe the issue that we are facing today, with so many obstacles that no one seems to know how to find a way forward, how to move past the economic union into a, let's say, a more tight political union? Or if you maybe think that we are at the level of political integration that was envisioned and is perfectly fine. Thank you.
Thank you. I suggest we take the 2 last comment question and over to Mr. Lamy to wrap up, please.
Hello, once again, Jans Dombra, Latvian Parliament. Well, if we talk about long-term future of Europe, we need to understand that without children, there will be no future. Simple as that. And almost basically all of European nations are facing a decline in birth rates. It will be the the largest problem in the long term if nothing will change in the upcoming years. And I think one of the missions that Europe may have is to state and create Europe as best place in the world to have family with children. And of course, there may be some European Union policies towards this goal. Okay, social benefits stays with the national governments, but for example, the housing for family with children, that's an issue that can be raised by European Union level as well, to create a family-friendly environment. It as well is European Union level issue. And if we manage to achieve such things, that our birth rates restore to 2 and more children per family, then we can be safe that Europe will remain after some 100 or 200 years.
Thank you. Thank you for your valid point. Isabel, over to you. And then we'll take yours as well.
So I would like to pose a question, but maybe particularly to the young people in the room. How do you interpret the fact that in the years 2019, not all, but a lot of young people demonstrate in the streets in the European capital in order to fight against climate change, which is probably the main threat for, not only for now, but particularly for them, for the new generation. Of course, COVID happened at that moment, but is it the only explanation to explain that young people appear as less engaged to make pressure on the Commission and all the European authorities and also national ones in order to keep the question of climate high in the political agenda, which is maybe not exactly what is happening now? Do you have an interpretation how it changed and why and what is happening now for all those young people so engaged at that time and maybe not engaged or not engaged on the same way today?
Thank you, Isabel. And I see another young person who wants to jump in. But I suggest we take that question, then we conclude with you, and then I encourage you to ask your question in the next session. So,
I'm Irena Petrovic. I come from Serbia. I run the WMJ Foundation, and 2 years ago we launched the EU Pravo Zato initiative. The idea behind is to promote EU values and to to use understandably language to explain the terms like growth plan and all the values and legislation, let's say, related to the EU. And when we started, the idea was to create a website and to focus on young people. So we did research, and we found out actually that our youth is informed in social media, first of all. The EU delegation was not allowed to use TikTok, for example, because it's a Chinese company, and there was the gap. That was the space where pro-Russian narratives actually took place. And we switched from the idea to focus only on the website. We created a new team focused only on social media in order to try to help switch the narratives. So I would like to emphasize that the importance of using channels that youth choose is extremely important. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes.
Yes. Hello, my name is Emil, and I would like to thank you all for being here and for me to have the opportunity to just say a little bit. I would just like to answer the question towards us young people, and I think that a lot of people I know have this strange feeling towards the EU. They feel a lot distance from the powerhouse that is called the EU. That doesn't know very much, and they don't think that they really have a lot to say in the decision making when it comes to the EU. There's also can be seen in the participation in elections, in European Parliament elections in Denmark, for example, where it's a lot lower turnout than towards the Danish Parliament among the youth. But I just have a question for all of you, just to think about while you're leaving here today. And that is from all of us young people, and that is how do you think we can ensure that the current youth today is more included in the future, or from now on, hopefully, about the future of the Europe, because it's your future, it's all of our future, but it's also our future. It's the youth future, and we need to also have a say in that. And I think you young people have tried to say something trying to make points about the climate and other things, but sometimes maybe we don't think we get really a say, and that the current powerhouse that is the EU just rolls along and among without even thinking of it. So I just think that we need more focus on listening to the young people and listening to their perspective, and maybe listen to if they have some solutions in some of the problems that we faces in the EU altogether.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I suggest Ms. Lamy, reacts to the comments he has heard so far, and then I'll pass over to the mentor.
Yeah, very shortly, and connecting several of your observations or questions. Starting from economic union versus political union, I realized some time ago, but after I had left Brussels with Delors, I came back later, that there's no shame that economic integration leads to political integration is a mistake. It is an error. It does not work. And the people who best explain why it doesn't work are anthropologists. There is a glass ceiling between economic integration and political integration for very simple reason, which they, with their social science, explain extremely well. And that's one of the answers to your question. You do not belong to a market. You belong to a political entity, a polis, to use the Greek word, which you have in common with others. The market you don't have in common. You behave rationally with prices and supply and demand, but there's nothing that tells you that you are part of a bond. And this is where I think, this is what I call the north face of European integration, is the one that tries and put the spotlight on what we have in common. The reality being that we've all been educated in history, in caricatures, in jokes about our neighbors, on the fact that we are very different. And the reality, the anthropological reality in Europe, is that we believe we are so different that the balance between what we have as difference and we have in common is wrong. The reality being, the anthropological reality being that we have much more in common than we believe, and that we've been taught by our history, our culture, which basically is done to create a feeling that you belong to something you have in common, which is different from what the others have in common. And this, I think, this is the answer to your question. That's why Erasmus works. Erasmus works because people realize that these differences are not real differences. They are apparent differences. They've been told this was very different, but in their own experience, it's not that different. So I think the way to go, and especially for young people, is to try and help them and us all to unveil the common that lies behind this surface of differences. Now, I recognize it's a bit complex, takes a bit of time, and if I had time, I could give you a number of experiments that show that it works. Not least because people are curious about these differences. They like understanding them. When you explain why there is a difference, people like this. They like this, and then at the end of the demonstration, they realize that it's not different. And I think that's the way to go, and that's the way to create this bridge between economic integration and political integration. We have to speak more about belonging than just behaving as rational actors.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That's the end of this part. And now we move into the closing session. So I hand over to my colleague, Dharmendra, and I just want to thank you all again for all your valid points raised so far. Dharmendra, over to you. Thank you.